All right, and welcome back to part two of a seven-part series as we dissect the Disinformation Primer from USAID. And I wanted to cover a couple things that I discussed yesterday. One of them was, actually, first I want to say thanks to Mr. Mike Benz. Mike Benz has been phenomenal and has been at the tip of the spear when it comes to USAID and as this kind of unfolds. And Mike's been screaming about this for years, by the way. And just to give you a little bit of background on Mike Benz, number one, you can find him on X. And his background is he is a State Department guy and highly intelligent, and also has a cyber background as well, and does a great job at breaking all this stuff down for you. So you can follow him on X. I think it's Mike Ben at Mike Ben Cyber. I think is his handle. Phenomenal, wonderful patriot, and doing a great job for us everyday Americans, and just pointing out what's going on with USAID. And secondly, I wanted to bring up the Internews Network. Internews Network is really instrumental in this, and I wanted to actually give you a little bit of more of a definition on Internews Network and what they do, because they are critical in this as well. So let me go ahead and pull that up if I can. 1 second here. So essentially what Internews Network does is they're simply known as Internews. It's a nonprofit organization founded in 1982 by a few different individuals in California. Initially, they were established to foster open communication during the Cold War, most notably through projects like the Emmy-winning space bridges connecting the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Internews has since developed into a global media support entity operating in over 100 countries, and that's the critical piece in this. So they've essentially kind of established local media and trained journalists, and they're promoting internet freedom, and they help media outlets achieve financial stability, of course, as long as you toe the line with what the narrative is and what they're trying to push. So they're headquartered out of California, and they have additional hubs in DC, London, and beyond. And they're led by the president and CEO is Gene Bergot, I think is his name. And they have a robust network of essentially 30 offices worldwide. And so they're part of this whole kind of spider web, if you will, of networking. It's really of news, information, and pushing narratives and narrative control. So over the decades, Internews has trained thousands of journalists, supported the creation of numerous independent media outlets, and have tackled issues like disinformation, health journalism, and environmental reporting through initiatives like the Earth Journalism Network. So they're primarily funded by the U.S. and some European governments, and I did take a look at it. They received over the last, I think, a couple decades, and I want to say it was $478 million from just USAID alone. But they also received contributions from foundations like Melinda and Bill Gates. Again, all of them left-leaning, right? All of it is left-leaning to promote specific narratives in journalism and information. So they've drawn some praise, of course. You know, they're not always all bad, but for strengthening journalism and fragile democracies. But they've also received a lot of criticism, and the criticism comes from what? Because they serve as a tool for narrative control under the guise of free speech. Again, if you take a look at the website, which is usaspending.gov, I got that wrong yesterday as well. usaspending.gov, which is an open source website. If you take a look at that and you type in Internews Network, or if you type in USAID or whatever research you want to do, you'll start to see the money train, right? Like for example, let's just talk about just off the top of my head. some agencies and news networks that are receiving money. It was the Associated Press were receiving funding, Politico's was receiving funding, Reuters was receiving funding. Now they'll say that they were in the guise of prescription, or not prescriptions, but subscriptions, to have access to their media. Now, is that true? Who knows? But anyways, the point being is that Internews Network is a critical piece to USAID because they're part of the spider web of journalists and that essentially are pushing out this propaganda. So I just wanted to go ahead and point that out as well. And again, if you want to look at anything with spending, or you're just curious to, hey, why are all these left-leaning agencies receiving money, but no right-wing? I haven't found any right-wing agencies receiving funding on usaspending.gov. Now, are they receiving funding? Is there some corruption on the right side? Of course there is. There's corruption on both sides, right? I am not blinded to that fact. Both parties have been corrupted, they're about power and control. And, President Trump is not perfect either, but again, this is where it's so important to have media disconnected from specifically government funding, because there's a conflict of interest. You cannot have internet freedom or news freedom, if you will, with being funded by the government. It's a quid pro quo per se. You're not going to bite the hand that feeds you, right? That's just not what you're going to do. But anyways, that was one thing I really wanted to focus on with besides Mike Ben's Internews Network. And I want to talk about one other thing. So as you go through this document, you will realize that it is it's really like a playbook for how to censor on a global scale. But here's the thing. It's not just a playbook, because this is actually ongoing. It's a playbook that has been executed by certain segments of society. It happens to be the left-leaning side that is perpetuating this type of narrative and narrative control. I'm not saying the right side is perfect, but you take a look at this playbook, you take a look at what Kamala Harris has said, you take a look at what some of the Democratic Party members have said in regards to disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. They use these terms, and they use them often. It's because this playbook was obviously delivered to that side, if you will, and they've been using it. Because these terms were not around in the last, probably the decade prior. These terms were really not there. But once 2016 kind of started to roll around, these terms, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, have been used more and more often, and specifically from the left-leaning side. So I just want to go ahead and point that out. I think it's important that we cover that. Let's see here. So let's go ahead and talk about part 2 here, which is understanding information disorder. And there's not a whole lot of new information. We kind of went over some of this information yesterday, but again, I think it's important to go ahead and take steps to go through each section so everybody can see. So understanding information disorder, which is part 2. Let me make sure I've got this functioning correctly so you guys can see everything. Yes, you can. So, okay, let's see here. Let me go ahead and blow this up or shrink this just a little bit so you guys can see. Hold on here. Oh, that's a little bit too small. Okay, let's see here. Okay, one of the terms that they focus on part 2 is the term, we went over information disorder, but they go over this term fake news. And this is kind of like a shot at President Trump, I think. If you take a look at this, they really highlight fake news and that term for that reason. And of course, President Trump, I think, is well known for making that term famous, if you will, by calling CNN fake news. So they throw this in there. So let's go ahead and read this right now. It says fake news is a bad term, primarily because it's a trap. It's not news, just the term generates mistrust of the press, of the work of journalists. Political leaders have started using the term against the press, which is, again, I think is kind of a jab at President Trump, which is especially serious. This is a crucial moment when we have to defend journalism. We have to promote a journalism of honesty, a journalism that is seen to build the truth. And then it gives you the actually condition here of information disorder. We went over this yesterday, but I'll go ahead and read it again. Information disorder is a condition in which truth and facts coexist in the milieu of misinformation and disinformation, conspiracy theories, lies, propaganda, and half-truths. In fact, Ground Views identified 10 types of misinformation and disinformation. So here, the individuals are framing and shaping what information disorder is. And in addition to that, it's going to give you 10 types of misinformation and disinformation. Now for us Americans, this might seem like, okay, big deal. They're labeling these, they're identifying these terms. But if you take a look, again, thank gosh that we do live in America. But if you take a look at what is going on in England, this is exactly why people are being arrested. Because of this playbook is how Europe and other countries are actually operating. So let's go over 10 types of misinformation and disinformation. And I'm going to blow this up just a little bit more. So first type is false connection. It's when headlines, visuals, or captions don't support the content. Manipulated content is when genuine information or imagery is manipulated to deceive. Misleading content is the use of information to frame an issue or individual. Fabricated content is content that is 100% false, designed to deceive and do harm. And sponsored content, advertising a page of disguised and editorial content. Interesting. And again, it's just framing and shaping all these different types, put some labels on any type of information that they deem to be a threat. False context is when genuine content is shared with false contextual information. And this next one is a kicker. It's satire or parody. No intention to cause harm, but has potential to fool. I'm sorry. I'm getting older, so I can't read that well. But here's what's the shocking part of this. So it is identifying satire or parody as being misinformation or disinformation. So in other words, we can't have any comedy at all, is essentially what they're saying. And Gavin Newsom had talked about this, I think it was about maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. Actually, it was less than that, on X, regarding Elon Musk, that he was going to file a lawsuit for satire or parody. So again, my point is like, where are they getting this mindset, this game plan? It comes from this document. So you have Kamala Harris, who's openly talked about having a mechanism in place to govern social media platforms. She openly talked about that on several occasions in the news, I think starting in 2019. Gavin Newsom talked about filing a lawsuit against Elon Musk for satire or parody. Where are they getting this from? This is the document they're getting it from, right? This is the playbook that the left was given. And again, it's the far left. And hey, here's the deal. Like, in terms of my, I'm a liberal leaning guy when it comes to, just, giving people the right to do whatever they want to do. But, just like everybody else, I happen to be more of a conservative side when it comes to economics, when it comes to having a balanced budget, which is like most people. Most people are either center or a little bit to the right, or center and a little bit to the left. But then you have the extremes, the far, far left, which is Gavin Newsom, which is Kamala Harris, which is the screaming Democrats that are right now that are screaming at the top of the hill for woke ideology and DEI, which a hill that they're willing to die on, which they have died on. And the country voted for a radical change. The Democrats have failed to realize that and are standing ground on this ideology because they're losing the culture war, and they fail to admit that, right? So, and that's the shocking part of kind of what's going on, which is what I think is the demise of the Democratic Party. And look, hey, America needs to be united. We need to come together and realize, like, okay, we've got some people that are way too far on the left, way too far. And America made a mandate, and they chose President Trump. And there's a reason why, because when you start to force all of these ideologies, like Kamala Harris was trying to do, like Gavin Newsom has been trying to do, and you realize that you have lost the fight. You lost the House, you have lost the Senate, you lost the White House, you lost a popular vote, you lost every swing state. You've been losing ground to minority voters, to young voters, and they're still dying on that hill, which is the woke ideology and DEI, right? Which is trying to force that on to an American populace that does not want it. Now, again, I know some people would adamantly just, doesn't matter what you tell them. They'll die being a Democrat regardless, as long as President Trump doesn't, as long as President Trump goes away, that's all they care about. They'll continue to vote on the Democratic side, regardless of, the scoreboard, which is, hey, you've lost everything. The American people have spoken. And it's reasons like this and documents like this that is anti-American. It's not what the people want. It's not what the people voted for. And when you talk about identifying misinformation and disinformation as satire or comedy, like it's okay to be offended. It's not against the law to be offended, right? None of this is against the law. It's just people having the power and the will to exercise their freedom of speech, to exercise the freedom of expression, to exercise an inalienable, how do you pronounce that? Inalienable right of being an American and be able to voice our concerns and to voice whatever we want to do. None of this is illegal. None of it at all. And as long as you don't, so the next section is going to talk about hate speech, and we'll get into that in a second. But again, it's not illegal to be offended or to offend someone. That is just life. People are going to have different senses of humor. The people are going to do different things. People are going to make you upset. It doesn't mean it's illegal. It's just the world that we live in. And point all being, to kind of wrap this up a little bit, is Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, and the woke left received this training, it feels like, right? It comes from this document. At least that's my 2 cents, is that this document was crafted and created. They've been working on it behind the scenes, and this ideology has been pushed to that far extreme left, which again is un-American. So I digress. I just wanted to kind of state that real quick. So, all right, the next point here is imposter content when genuine sources are impersonated. Again, that is comedy, perhaps, not against the law, nothing illegal about that whatsoever. But they want to coin and term all of these things so they can put it in these little categories, and they can potentially take action on them if they need be. And you're seeing that in England, like I talked about yesterday. So we got propaganda here is when content is used to manage attitudes, values, and knowledge. and then errors when established news organizations make mistakes while reporting. And we all make mistakes when we report. Every news agency is going to make mistakes. Every news agency is going to, receive some bad information, run with it, and realize that, hey, we got to do a retraction. It's just life. It's just how things are. So, a couple things I wanted to focus on here as well is on this page, you'll see, let's see right here, you'll see a lot of Facebook, right here. Facebook is mentioned in this document quite a bit, and I think this is by design. Facebook has obviously a large reach, but not only just in America, but they own WhatsApp as well, and they own Instagram. But from a global perspective, Facebook is very popular. Now, Mark Zuckerberg, of course, was under an immense amount of pressure to censor individuals back during this time frame. And you can see this throughout this document. I'm not a huge fan of Mark Zuckerberg. I think he kind of goes, as the wind goes, per se. He kind of aligns himself with who's ever in office. But I will say this. It is obvious that Facebook was targeted specifically in this document. It leads me to believe that Zuckerberg had an immense amount of pressure on him from the Biden administration. Of course, over the last few months, we have learned what Zuckerberg was forced to do as the Biden administration was putting pressure on him to censor different things, specifically the COVID-19 vaccine, and some other things that were identified as misinformation, disinformation. And again, so you have this far left party who is actively using this playbook to implement their policies and to silence critics, to push narrative, to have narrative control. It's obvious that Zuckerberg was being targeted in this document. Again, not a huge fan of Zuckerberg. I think he goes where the wind goes, but I got to be honest with you. If you're him in this time frame where Biden was in charge, well, if he wasn't really in charge, somebody was in charge. I think it was Obama. But it was obvious to me that Facebook was definitely targeted, without a doubt. So, I do have some sympathy for him in that regard. So, here it's just giving some more information why people use disinformation. Just gives you a little bit more of some background into that. Yada, yada, yada. It's just nothing really eye-opening here. Additional reasons information disorder is on the rise include the erosion of trust in institutions, especially government and media institutions. And there is an erosion in institutions, in all institutions, specifically government institutions, news institutions, and et cetera. I think CNN's ratings, MSNBC ratings have never been lower. You can see that they are taking massive steps to kind of combat that. Where they have started to shake up their roster, and they're starting to let more conservative members, on the right side have a voice. And I think that's good for America. Again, every side, America has to come together. We have to unite. America divided is not a good America. We have to figure out what our differences are and be able to have some dialogue. And it's important to have both sides represented, besides both sides doing this at each other. And the only way that you can really, in my opinion, the only way that you can really work through what we need to work through as Americans is dialogue and conversation. We have to have open dialogue and open conversation, and both parties have to put their egos aside and say, okay, look, neither side is perfect, but we have to figure out something to bring America back together, because America is so divided right now. And it's hard to see. It's really hard to swallow what has happened to America in regards to our, the division that's ongoing currently. Here it gives you just a step-by-step guide to combating disinformation. It's kind of hard to read. It's just this here is, let's see here, step 4. I'll just give you. We'll just go through this real quick. Number 1 is do a visual assessment. 2 is identify the news outlets. Check the web domain. 4 is check the About section. 5 is identify the author. 6 is identify the central message. 7 is assess spelling, grammar, and punctuation. That's interesting. 8 is analyze sources and quotes. 9 is find other articles. And 10 is turn to fact checkers. And let's talk about the fact checkers real quick, because Zuckerberg had made an announcement that they're going to do away with fact checking. But fact checking, and there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, it's extremely biased, and Zuckerberg admitted that. And secondly is this: people don't know this about fact checking. Fact checking in a court of law, and it was Stossel versus Meta. In a court of law, fact checking was defined as opinions. They're the opinions of that specific platform. So in other words, they're not fact. They're not sure whether this is true or not. They're just opinions. And you saw this happen in the 2008 housing market crash, when the market took a dump. A lot of agencies, specifically Moody's, and there was one other one that does rating. What they do is they rate bonds, right? They rate stocks, AA, AAA, whatever the case may be, which will give you some kind of surety that the bond is strong, right? AAA rating, AA rating, single A rating, all these different ratings, and they have different definitions for it, so you can trust them, right? AAA is the best, AA is the second best, blah, 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 blah. So in a court of law, just like fact checking, it was identified that these are just the opinions of institutions. So they're not a for sure thing. There might be some factual evidence to the fact checking, right? But essentially, in the court of law, they're opinions. So keep that in the back of your mind when you do see fact checking. It's just another human being who's making an assessment around other human beings who are making assessments, who surround themselves in a certain echo chamber. And again, most of the media platforms, most of the social media platforms happen to all lean left, right? So if you are surrounding yourself with an echo chamber that happens to lean left, then of course you're going to be biased towards that left-leaning echo chamber. It's just human nature. It's who we are. So fact-checking is just a way to do what? Censor. That's just another way to minimize conversation and to censor. Again, more information here on Facebook. And it gives you some stats on Facebook and on a global scale as well. And according to news conducted by Reuters, WhatsApp, again, Reuters, left-leaning news agency. WhatsApp, owned by Facebook. Again, just more data on the Facebook and some metrics here. A little bit more information on. So this here section is giving you some good indication on the metrics in terms of people that are utilizing the internet on a mobile basis, on an internet user basis, on a social media basis. So it's just giving you some pure data here. That's essentially what this is doing. So 73% of women journalists participating in the UNESCO IS survey say they experience online violence, right? Again, take it for what it is. Just some more discussions here. Okay, so here's an important part, and let's go into this. Why is it cutting that off? There we go. Hate speech. Yeah, there we go. Hate speech and dangerous speech. So hate speech and dangerous speech are considered potentially life-threatening aspect of information disorder. Again, it loves to use these terms, these alarmist terms. It loves to use the term information disorder, which it identifies and defines in the last section. So the definition of hate speech is often contested, particularly because it's such a charged topic, and legal and social organizations often alternate definitions for the same act. This topic is particularly controversial because there tends to be fine lines drawn in democratic societies regarding what is considered acceptable free speech and what is not. Some definitions consider hate speech a verbal attack made on a group based on a shared identity, while others agree that attack on an individual can be considered hate speech. Now, hate speech and dangerous speech are important aspects to this document because there's a fine line between hate speech and dangerous speech. Is hate speech something that is illegal? In America, no, it is not. It is not illegal for me to say to have a hate speech or to type hate speech. It's not illegal for me to have necessarily dangerous speech. What is illegal is if I threaten someone, right? So what you're seeing in specifically in the EU, in England, in Germany, and other places, that they will use these two terms, hate speech and dangerous speech, to lock people up. And again, America is blessed because we do have the First Amendment. It does protect us. I'm not, of course, condoning hate speech and saying, hey, everybody should be, just spewing out hate speech and dangerous speech all over the place. It's not who I am. It's not what I do. However, there is a fine line between hate speech, dangerous speech, and illegal speech. And although hate speech, you and I may not agree to that, we may not condone it, we may not participate in these types of activities. However, government entities can have a very broad definition for these two terms, and they've been utilizing this in England and in Germany and other places to lock people up and to throw them in jail, which is essentially what has been going on. So again, the point to this document is this is a game plan per se that has been executed out into the real world. This is a plan that's not just a plan anymore. It's been executed. And this plan would have been, in my opinion, would have been executed if Kamala Harris would have won, because everything that she has been saying, and also included in Gavin Newsom as well, using these types of terms. They got these terms from somewhere, right? So this plan has been perpetuated throughout, and I'm a firm believer that if Kamala would have won, that we would be that they would be locking people up today, and she had openly talked about it. So it gives you here the term as dangerous speech is any form of expression, speech, text, or image, meme, that can increase the risk that is its audience will condone or participate in violence. So it's not that they will, but they may condone or participate in violence. And it gives you here this dangerous speech project, which is just a framework for, it basically creates the frame for them around this whole topic. So they have some type of source, if you will, some framework that the audience and the media, let me see here. So it's a dangerous speech project has put forward a framework that considers the speaker, the audience, and the medium, as well as the message and context in determining risk, which is an interesting comparison with the distinction between misinformation and disinformation. Disinformation is also explicitly a category of dangerous speech where it has a capacity to lead to violence and other types of harm. And again, I pray for our brothers and sisters across the pond, because they're dealing with this tyrannical government as they impose this type of rhetoric on their populace. So it's shocking what has happened with what's going on in England right now and what's going on in the EU. And here it gives you the Kremlin's disinformation methods. It just gives you what Russia has been doing. And then here on the next side, it's the Russian playbook, if you will. And if you look at this Russian playbook, it tells you the rules for the Russian strategy for disinformation and the 7-step process intended to ultimately fracture societies from the inside. Well, this is essentially what this document has been talking about, and what this document does as well. It's when somebody has been deemed the enemy, this is kind of the playbook that they use, right? To constrict them, to silence them, to oppose them, to essentially ruin individuals and other entities and agencies, which is what has happened throughout the world. So let's see here. The government of Russia's strategy for dealing with negative reporting on its actions resolves around 4 tactics. And this is very similar to the playbook from the left is what we're seeing here is that you first thing you do is dismiss the critic. Number two is distort the facts. Number three is distract from the main issue. And number four is dismay the audience. And then it's essentially just a playbook, if you will, on how to combat misinformation and disinformation. And then it goes into topics or the changing tactics for China as well. And so anyways, but this is section 2. Here, in the long run, it's just kind of outlining more of the terms. It's outlining some of the methods that are being utilized by Russia, by China, and then also it's just identifying more of the terms: hate speech, dangerous speech, and then also taking a shot at what I believe is President Trump at the very beginning as well. And again, Facebook is littered throughout this document, so. I do have some empathy for Mark Zuckerberg and what he was going, and if you take a look, this document was published in 2021, and that's really when the screws were being tightened on Facebook per se by the Biden administration. Well, I still don't believe Biden was in charge. He was asleep at the wheel and senile for the last 4 years. I'm fairly confident that Obama and others were running the country, and that's just what I believe. So, but this is part 2. Let me know what you guys think. Appreciate your guys' input and also your time. And feel free to critique or comment or whatever you'd like. I have no true skin in this game. I'm just presenting some information and just pointing out some things that I think are important for us to highlight and discuss. I'm not a journalist or anything like that. I'm just a lay person trying to figure out what's going on in this country. But, these are important discussions to be had. We are a country that needs to work together and to bring ourselves together. From the far left and the far right. This country divided, and we're so divided right now. It's like we have to do something to be able to work through our differences. We're all in this together, and the only way that we're going to be able to work through our differences is communication and open dialogue. And guess what? Not all of us are right. Not everybody on the left is bad. Not everybody on the right is bad. Not everybody on the left is right, and not everybody on the right is right. We're just all flawed creatures trying to figure out what's going on in this crazy world and make America a better place. But we've got a lot of work to do. We're $37 trillion in debt. We have to balance the budget. I mean, that nothing changes in America, specifically from an inflation perspective. Nothing changes until we're able to balance that budget. And that means that we're going to have to make drastic cuts across the board, to include the Department of Defense, to include all of the agencies, to include some benefits that Americans have been receiving. We're broke, and a big part of that is that we've been just doling out money to non-government organizations left and right. I mean, you can go to usaspending.gov and you can. There's billions going out, millions and billions of dollars going out to these non-government organizations, which really are government organizations that are receiving funding from us. And who knows what they're doing, right? And you've seen all the reports coming out from Doge. Those reports are real, and I encourage you, don't take my word for it. Don't take Doge's word for it. Go to usaspending.gov and do your own research, and you will realize that, holy cow, we're spending millions and billions of dollars on these crazy projects that no one cares about but just a few people, and we can't afford it. Nothing changes in America until we're able to bring the value of the dollar back. The value of the dollar has been diminished, so much so due to reckless government spending, and it's been going on for a decade. So America has a lot of pain to go through. I don't believe that Trump will be able to fix this in one term, in specifically the budget. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe these tariffs will actually work out. I think tariffs is the right course of action. And I do have a financial background, and I have done some research on tariffs. And I do believe that is the better course of action. President Trump has talked about doing away with the income tax and relying more on tariffs. We had relied on tariffs before. until I think it was 1913, and that's when the Federal Reserve Act came in place. And then, of course, the IRS was established, and it's been downhill ever since. And so we've got to write this budget. We've got to do something different to get America back on track. We got to bring manufacturing jobs back here to America. And tariffs help with that. Tariffs are going to force Americans to buy American products. But hey, we got to start making things here in America again. So, anyways, I digress. Thank you so much. Apologies for the late to do, but you know, I had some things going on today. So, but hey, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bless your heart. Thank you guys, and God bless.